Well, welcome to the Dream Labs. Dr. Contrast Live here. Hope everybody's having a good run here. And Doug, thanks so much for joining us. And Chip, good to have you on board. And I'm just going to go through some exercises here today. A little bit of a brief review on where we were. For example, it was a lot of fun last Friday evening. We did a show on a good friend of mine, Shadow's Spacebar program. And hey, I'm doing well, Chip. Thanks for joining us here. Just want to go back today and go through some of the progress we've made since that Friday's program. And the premise of the whole program was that for weeks we've been sending out some information on helping the audience or the viewership help us direct and design a new spaceship for the citizens, almost like in the Banu language format. So we went through a lot of variations last Friday evening, and arrived at some pretty good input from the individuals that were tuning in. And but before I begin that subject matter, I think the thing that I really wanted to stress on, and all of us seem to agree on the basic premise, the reason we've called and entitled the show today the QuadraWing. It's a 4-wing system, very similar to Dragonfly in concept, but I think the idea behind it all, as you see these sketches unfold, you'll see some variations on theme, on how this thing begins to unsettle itself and begin to direct the theme. And as I said, these are sketches that were done after Friday's review on Shadow's program. So without any further delay, let's go through some of these things, and then we'll show you what the progress has been. And these sketches, let me just point out, these sketches came in rankings. For example, on last Friday evening show, we wrapped it up around midnight, was very interesting. They said, which flavors do you like in terms of these sketches? There were 3 variations that were liked. Number 1, engines overhead and split. Number 2, a very organic looking fuselage system. And number 3, a split wing or a quadra-wing process with a lot of elevation and a lot of real downhill, like California rate character to it. So what you'll see here are the series of sketches we've taken from that input from the audience and begin to put them together. So phase 1 here, this is the first one we did. The first one I did earlier in the week here, looking at just front elevation studies here with like wing stance, cockpit area, landing gear systems, and so forth. And beginning, there's that split wing. We don't see it here because in the quadra-wing in this elevation, the wing sits in behind that. You'll see as we go through some of the sketches how that begins to unfold. So this is a first pass at getting. I just spent some time, pulled back from all the information on Friday evening show, and began to pull back and look at the input coming from the show, and then begin to put sketches together. So there's a whole series of, and I started looking at front elevations just to get a character or a stance. So there's number 1. Number 2, same variation, just a little bit different than the geometry. For example, going to a lift drop engine wing system and split it up. And then again, there's that quadra-wing, that second wing in the area here. And the one down below, same thing. Again, that quadra-wing above, which is articulates, and then it's fixed wing down below. And you begin to pick up that, what I thought was interesting here in this sketch, we began to pick up some of the characteristics like this dragonfly. There was something about, if you ever noticed when the dragonfly, I did a little research on this thing about a week or 2 ago, and it's interesting, when those guys, when the dragonfly begins to land or rest, you'll notice the wings detent drop. They'll drop 2 or 3 stages. That's to cool things off and to kind of regroup and maintain some of the transparency of the wing structure, and provide them with a dot system as to where the next takeoff and landing is going to take place. So they're just sending a lot of signals out there. But that's the reason for the drop wing status in the dragonfly, which I thought was neat, to just kind of begin to drop that section down and get that character to work for us here. So there's phase number 2, elevation. Then I went, okay, let's see if we can put something together here with this. Again, maybe pull the engines outboard a little bit, put a little bit of weight in these things, and then begin to get that. Another bit of cockpit detail, some landing gear surface, and a really real bulky process up front here to support that wing load. Then begin the engine nacelle itself, then drop the wing off, for example. Again, getting that droop look that we're after in this whole concept of this quadra-wing. And then down below, I thought, well, there it is there. Let's change a little bit of the venue here, a little elevation study. Look at the gesture in the thing. It's all California rake uphill. Really, yeah, thanks, Chip. I think we're starting to get there. You were there on Saturday, yeah, quite busy. Yeah, and I think that's one of the nice things about it. I mean, the busier, the better. I think we can kind of overstate it a little bit, and as we go through and begin to modify it, we can kind of tailor it back and do a little bit more finessing with it. But I went over the edge really for the purpose of getting some really good character or stance down. But notice again, we talked about this early on in the stream. The whole concept is getting that California rate, that downhill run with a very gunner pod back here. And the other portion, like a Detroit drop, where the wings just kind of come right back and kind of counterpoint that, and give you that dragonfly look to it. Plan view study, again, one wing overlapping the other. This is the upper tier, which is in here, and then this is the lower tier, which is this guy here, as it begins to articulate and move, and it swings down. As this moves open, this swings up, and so forth. So a lot of dynamics going on in the forms themselves. So that was another study we did. Let's move along here. Now another gesture. Looking at this, looking at from an elevation perspective, a lot of uphill run in the engine system, and then again that California downhill run, a California rake, just uphill. A lot of gunner system back here, like an articulating pod that's fully automated. It's not manned, so to speak, but it can be automated from the pilot system. And then again, look at the wing structure. It kicks uphill, then comes back in and drops down and gives that droop look. And this little front three-quarter study, interesting things start to come together here a little bit as far as the concept is concerned. Just looking at how do we place the variation, for example, a low cockpit, and the turners in here, then the wing system up on top, then these then the upper dihedrals, and then that turret back here behind us all. Going to give it some character to it. So that's another pass at trying to look at maintain a character, again based on the input from the audience that was participating last Friday evening. So then we moved on again, went back into this, and to just change gears again, just looking for ways of treating that cockpit, that front end character, and landing systems. Again, uphill kick on the engine, and then again in this case the wing stayed uphill, but the one above, the elevation above it, shows that again. That not a severe drop, but again that same uphill run and downhill, and then that second dihedral up on top, going through the process. So that's that. Then we moved into some plan view studies here. Again, looking at what might happen. Again, lower tier of the wings, the upper tier of the wing, for example, that second dihedral, and then a real thin body form going back into this gunner system at the tail pod. One approach here where the wings kick upward, engine system would sit in here. Another approach, a dual cockpit, a little bit of a bullet form up front and a little recess behind it, and then turning back into this thing again with that this is the dihedral system here, and again the engine and wing system back here. Again, looking at a lot of interesting overlaps in terms of how we're going to take this thing in this generation and begin to develop a series of nice final sketches for presentation purposes, and getting it all put together as a package. Let's see here, Windows Defender summary. No, virus threat protection. Oh, there we go. We got it back. Okay. One of the things I'd like to just bring up at this point of view too, Chip, is if you're still with us, and Doug, we're looking for a name for this thing. So, I mean, I called the program today, the stream today, I entitled it QuadraWing, because we didn't want to get into any situations where we call it the Dragonfly or the Defender. That's already taken. But when you look at these sketches, what can we title this thing? Is there a neat name we can use to give it some sort of an identity? Again, I go back to the precept when I did a little research 2 or 3 weeks ago on this whole process. It was looking at the possibility of using a dragonfly, the physical dragonfly, and from biomimicry as a base to work from. So I'm not saying we're going to call it the dragonfly, but if you have any interesting concepts and names and so forth, let me know, and we'll just kind of pass it along and go through a selection process. And by the way, I'll be live again on Friday evening with the Shadow Man and the Spacebar program, taking phase 2 and going into some of the elements we talked about here today and keeping that program alive. And so there's another one here. Hey guys, it's a busy day. I'm looking to try and sneak over, but wow, look at these designs. Well, if you can't make it, man, we'd love to have you on board here. See, so let's move along here. Plan view studies. And I went right back into it again with some really quick, again, front three-quarter. Now this started to take on some character that I thought was interesting, that we're looking for. This droop wing system, this upper tier articulating second set of wings, for example, for stabilizers, etc. But no, look, interesting how the whole thing drops. It has that California drop to it, California rake. But again, the engine system, then the engines are outboard quite a bit, but there's a lot of wing droop here that kind of tells a story. And again, this one here as well, the elevation, starting to look at what the character might really begin to move toward, and I think that's a good process too, to get into a point where it is mean looking. I think that's one of the things we talked about last Friday night, Shadow, and those guys who were tuning in, giving us feedback, it ought to have an aggressive, mean look to it. It's very sinister. And I think some of the sketches we did early on Friday night didn't have that same character. But I think going back in and looking at the input from the group that were tuning in and giving us feedback, this starts to really tell a story now about what that thing should really look like. very menacing looking, extremely attack oriented, and very venomous too as well. I think there's a lot of venomous look to it, especially with the split wing system. And I think the QuadraWing process is really unique in terms of making it a little bit of a different departure for some of the space programs we're going to start looking at here eventually. So let's move along here. Another pass, and this guy here, and it's going to come along. There's a little overhead, 3/4 what this thing might look like. The changing a little bit of the character back here in the gunner system. And again, looking at the air, it's a tough view to kind of visualize because there's an actual wing drop here. Because of the overhead perspective, you don't see it that much, but there's enough character to kind of give it the flavor rafter, a drop pod with the gunning system underneath it, engine nacelles above and below, and again, that same dihedral piece. These upper wings begin to move. They kind of activate themselves as this thing maintains speed, and then the wing drop is there. That wing drop could actually move as well. So we're trying to articulate it right in this area where this thing begins to drop downhill, or also from a landing system up just a bit, so we can kind of clear things. And again, that whole gunning system back and through here with this rotating pod is an attack process at the rear end of the ship. So let me stop there for a moment, take a bit of a break. What do you think thus far, gang? Any input, conversation, or things you want to pass along that might be of some use here before doing exploratory work? What do you think? I'll just kind of be quiet here and wait for some input from Chip or Doug if they're still with us, and the Shadow, obviously, tune in, man. It'd be great to have you come on board here. While you're doing that, I'll just kind of follow the stream setup here. That tail looks might thin for a gunner. Well, that's the other point too, Chip. What we're looking at, that mighty thin area, but I think that could be all done from a remote process from the cockpit itself. That could be autonomous. It's a remote turret. Yeah, it really is remote in terms of being handled electronically from the capsule. So there was never really intention of a manned system back there. I started out with that approach, which is good. But the more I thought about it, the leaner the better. I think we keep it nice and slim and not make too big of a statement. I don't want a big ball turret back there out of B-17, so it's much more of a stealthy look to the tail section. So that's all set. Thanks, Chip. Good input there. Again, there's the overhead 3/4, just a variation again on theme. And by the way, too, today's process is really much more in terms of maintaining the theme and just going through variations on theme. We're not settling the design yet. We're just going through the sketches that were generated from the input last Friday night, and it was a lot of fun to put these guys together. It just changed the whole setup. So there's an overhead 3/4. Now I went to a rear 3/4 and just kept it nice and simple. All of a sudden, now you can really see where the drop wing comes into play. And I think that's an interesting process. Now, instead of the dihedrals, for example, the movable pieces being up on top of the fuselage, now they're down below adjacent to the engine nacelles. But they still have that same process or that same personality. And then just simplifying a little bit of the gunning system back here. Now this proportion this has to be stretched a bit. It's a little bit too shallow yet, but I think it's getting some character behind this thing. It's starting to take on some interesting personality. And the more you walk around this guy, the more you move through it, the more challenges you start to think about. Again, cockpit, the floating, the sponson that supports the engine nacelle, the drop wing, some hydrofoils out on top, or foil systems outside to stabilize the machine, and then getting that articulating, that second wing panel, some stabilizers back here, and again, stretching this whole gun, this whole process. If I were to redo the sketch, and it becomes part of the process, if that shape becomes valid here, I'd like to just take this guy and just stretch it a little bit and get a little more length to it so it has more of a realistic, real long, thin California rate to it. But I think that the essence is there. Kept it pretty sharp. It's a little bit organic in some cases, and it's very sheer in some places. But again, 3/4 rear. Another study here. We went that route again. Another variation of the thing where we really took advantage of those wings really went outboard and really playing up these hedrals up on top that begin to move back and forth in position. They'll come in and shovel with this, and begin to share that process. So let me stop there for a second. Any commentary so far on some of these themes you're seeing? Likes, dislikes, yays and nays? There's a lot of variation there, and I think that's one of the things I really love to do, is just take a shot at, well, what about this? And what about this? And what are what ifs? Anybody? Any comments out so far? Now, getting into the game plan here. Any comments from you about if you're still with us? Any input on the basic character? One thing about the sketch I just noticed too. Notice how I really began to stretch this. So I'm going to get that gunner's module back there. It's a little bit more little more realistic in terms of getting enough strength. And I still think I might go a little longer to make this thing really accentuate the fact that, hey, Nemo, how are you, Doc? Good to see you. Everything great? Afternoon, Ballistic. Good to have you on board here, guys. I'm just going through a generation of sketches here that we've pushed together since last Friday evening's program on the. No, not a problem. I'm glad you're on board. I'll go back through and show you some of these sketches in a real quick minute from last Friday evening's program at the Shadows Spacebar program. What these sketches are, Nemo and Ballistic, are sketches that were done and generated. Hey, thanks, Doug. These were done as a result of last Friday's input. We had, at the end of the program at midnight, we had three categories of selections to work with. The sketches I'm reviewing here today, before I start doing some little thumbnail studies, take it a little further, is what took place on Friday night, just putting those pieces into action. For example, a lot of California rake. They like the fact that they hire twin engine systems. And then also getting into a much more stealth look in terms of less helicopter, more fuselage type, and then really playing up this boom system and this dragonfly concept, even though we're not calling it a dragonfly. And by the way, Ballistic and Nemo, do you have any neat names to kind of pass along here? We're still trying to name this thing, so that's part of the little game plan as well. So let me go through this real quickly here. There's three-quarter, again, another variation on the same theme, looking at that very simplistic California rake. Very evil, sinister-looking machine here. So that's that guy. Then the last one here is just a little, again, not second to last, right? Again, playing up this whole idea of this very solid cockpit downhill rake. This is a little bit out of proportion. I'd like to take this turret and run it rearward just a little bit more to give it some more content. And again, same process. Now the wing surface, there's some inner and outer, the uppers, dihedrals hidden underneath the engine nacelles here. And then on top, there's no wing structure, fixed, movable. Again, another variation, a lot more stealth, a little sharper, a little more angular. Again, another variation on the theme. And then last but not least, just went back to basics again, looking at a very typical three-quarter front in this guy. Just give some kind of character. Again, really playing up this dropped wing system, and then with the dihedrals up and over above. So again, a little thumbnail study here in elevation. Again, back to a little side elevation there, but again, a little more cockpit relationship. Maybe it's a Gibber system where you've got the pilot, co-pilot all stacked them, but we're not quite sure where that's going to go yet. But again, another variation on the last piece. So let me go back and look at these sketches since Ballistic and Nemo came through. And I'm going to go back and run through these guys real quickly without a lot of explanation. And you'll see them as they go here. Let me preface the whole batch, Nemo and Ballistic, by saying this. These are sketches that were generated since last Friday's presentation. Start with some elevations. One. Second set, looking at kind of cockpit wing structure and stance. Third one, same process, a little bit of a plan view study in there, what that thing's going to look like with this very overlapping upper wing and this lower wing, for example. That would open up, this would open up and begin to move. So it's a QuadraWing system. Same with this one, back to some elevations and a little bit of a three-quarter front showing that gunner cockpit behind it all. Last one again, back to some basics, elevation and front cockpit study, the stance of the wings, etc. Again, back to a couple of plan views. What's this thing start to look like? Is it a single cockpit side by side, or is it two bubbles in terms of being an actual dual cockpit bug-like insect approach up front? And again, the wing system down below here. Again, back to a three-quarter. That just started to take on some real character. That whole idea of wings dropped and drooped, and then the engine's on board. I don't know if that's going to be part of the process yet or not, but we'll soon find out. Back to an elevation, trying to put some of this into practice, again with this upper dihedral and the fix below. Same process coming together. And the one with the wings drop, yeah, that's cool. And again, this is a little overhead three-quarter of what another variation of theme with the upper dihedrals and the wings fixed. You can't see what's happening in this view because of the overhead, but these wings are actually dropping as they come back down the ground plane. So that's the intent. And it's got a little bit more of a very simplified remote turret back there for combat purposes. Again, the three-quarter rear on this guy. Again, same approach again. Drop. You can really see where the wings drop in this guy. And then this is the dihedrals that move. This is fixed. Again, that QuadraWing piece is working with there. Imagine these as a physical metal model. Yeah. A little tough to do. We have to kind of simplify them a little bit. Shadow, it's a Starship. Nemo, does it have a proboscis snout? Yeah, it does in a way. I'll show you in a minute here. A couple more views. So from the other view, we'll show you that in just a second here, Nemo. Good question. Let's move along here. Rear 3/4. Another variation on thing where we take advantage of this dihedral that moves and shifts and rotates downhill. Again, fixed. Same process again from the rear. This one's a little bit deceptive. I'd love to take this thing and just kind of move it rear a little bit more. Really stretch that dynamic out to get that remote turret to work. Big cannon maybe. Yeah, that's not bad. Yeah, well, you know what? It's coming up. You're not going to believe this. Last but not least, a couple more studies here. Same process, a little more stealth-like, a little more angular. Again, the counterpoint of the round cockpit and canopy. The tractor beam. Yeah, that'd be kind of cool. And then again, same process. This cantilever, this boom back here, really stretch this out. Again, it's a little bit off key here. It's a little bit shortened. Then this one here. Back to the last study we looked at here, back to that stance again. And again, notice up front, that cannon system up front. There's a real great big huge turret up front there. I'll show you that in a moment. Then again, practicing here, really practicing the craft of getting the engine nacelles up and the wings to drop. And again, those dihedrals that move up on top behind it all. So there we are here. Since this is supposed to be a combat roll, but it can do that as well. Side view. Now let's go back here. That's the review for you, Nemo and Ballistic. Hope that helps kind of bring it up to speed a little bit. And then from then, throughout the course of the last few days, I went ahead and a little further. I took this into that little face. There's a little 3/4 study here, again from the rear. The lower wings. This is before the actual drop itself. Now this perspective is unusually unique, because what looks like an absolute distortion, it really is taking place there. It's correct, because if you drop the center line down up this pod, my center line is right through here. So that distance and that distance become compatible. It's the view that kind of fools us a little bit about where that turret is. Now notice how I stretched that a little bit and got that cannon process back here to really work with this thing. So the low wing system is still there. This would be at speed where the actual wings would come right back up and fold back in. And these are the interior dihedrals here. This guy would be the one that slides. This moves uphill and this moves downhill. So a lot of motion here in terms of putting this piece together. So anybody, let me stop there for a second before I go any further with some of these things. What do you think, gang? Got some potential here? Again, you're starting to really put this program together. Thanks to your input, these sketches were done as a result of your input from last Friday evening. Anybody? Pretty awesome, eh? All right, thanks, Chip. Well, I think we made a lot of progress, don't you think, Chip, from last Friday night? I'll tell you, I'll be very candid with you. I had a great precept and start the program last Friday night with Shadow. We had a great banter back and forth. But the thing that really disturbed me throughout the night was I couldn't break out of that paradigm to get this wing system to work, and it was a little bit frustrating. So truth be told, I got home about midnight, well, about 1 o'clock on Friday night. When I got home, I just sat down and said, this is not right. So I sat down until about maybe 4 in the morning and just started cranking sketches out and sent some to Shadow. So yeah, now we're back on theme now. So this is thanks to you all for coming back in and really putting some really stuff together. A lot of progress and thanks, Chip. I think, again, thanks to you guys and the Nemo and the gang who tuned in that night really made a big difference. So there's the first rear 3/4. So there's one approach to it. And I went ahead and said, all right, let's keep the theme moving here. There's one. There's a second coming from the front 3/4, and all of a sudden it's starting to take on some real character. Let me kind of get that thing in here. We'll have an additional camera and proper mic this time. I already see some design language from Consolidated Outlet, especially in the intakes and the wing structure, as well from Drake, especially the long fuselage with the struts looking like. So, what do you think, Nemo? Is it valid enough, you think? And again, notice the nose cannon in this guy, a little bit of a strut underneath it, engine nacelles up on top, drop wing. Really extended that whole the canopy, the cantilever where the cannon is, and then here the dual or QuadraWing up on top that begin to move and articulate, and these could do as well. These could drop even further, and so on. Don't use that D word here. There it is. What do you think, guys? Making any progress here? That was a phase 2 coming from this one, which is a rear. Notice there are different themes. I just didn't really stay in one area for a while here. I wanted to move around this thing to kind of give us enough flexibility to work with here. So there's one. Then we go back to this front 3/4. Again, still taking advantage of this very fluid, very soft looking force, and then all of a sudden it gets real sheer and crispens up as it goes back. Well, the caterpillar can go into the metaphor and get a beautiful. Yeah, there you go. So no word, D word again. So thanks for your help, guy. Wow, it's a reach, Nemo. Okay, very cool. So there's a front 3/4. Now let's move again. The last little study here, not that we're going to do today, but the last little sketch and refine. I went back to some really quick thumbnail sketches here. Again, overhead 3/4, 1 point, then from the rear again. Again, notice really playing up the idea of this split wing system, this QuadraWing. Again, very unique in terms of maybe a nice design or a theme aspect here. Notice again, this is all fixed, kind of comes back, and you can't see how much drop there is, except the other end. See how the wing disappears? That actually drops, and this becomes part of the fixed system. There's that upper dihedral that can either move and become very active as well. Pardon me. And again, a little thumbnail sketch here about where we are. Again, looking at that very simple wing drop upper, and then extending that pod system back here. And again, that nose cannon we were talking about earlier. So what do you think, gang? That's about where we are now as far as sketches go. That's a review process about where we've been. And I'm going to stop here I'm going to take a bit of a break, give my voice a break, and see what you guys think. From all the litany of sketches, I think we've got about, what, maybe 15, 20 variations on theme here. Loving the rear turret, how low profile. Yeah, it's keeping it nice and slim. That's the neat thing about it. It's not like the big B-17 blister that was back there during the 40s and 50s. The large engines from the earlier sketches were cool. Yeah, really awesome how this. Yeah, I think it's fun to watch. And thank you so much how this thing. And I think that's a key word about developing this thing. Thanks to last Friday night's input. A lot of development in terms of do this, try that. Made some good notes, went back in. And I think the twin wings, I think we need to say as well. I do too. I think the twin wings are really part of the whole process. No question about that at all. So, but to develop this thing is extremely critical. And Doug, if you're out there, what do you think thus far? Since you're new to the game plan here, are you still with us? Chip 7, I do like the monolithic look with some touch of a delicate wing. Yeah, I do too. I think it's delicate wings, very, very thin and character, but again, substantial enough to support the weight of the craft. Chip, thank you. Anybody else? Please feel free to just fire away here. These are nothing more than random sketches exploring a direction, trying to find a benchmark though where we can make this thing sing when it all comes together. It'll be a lot of fun to see how I'll begin to participate one with another. So neat stuff. Really loose little sketches here. Anybody else? While we're waiting for some feedback here, I'm just going to go back and let's look at some of the anatomy of these sketches here. Let's kind of break this thing open a little bit. Let's kind of put this anatomy together. Driveline to driveline. Let's get the basic system down here. Let's get the gesture in place. I'm going to work with the center line first. Really get this spike to work. Bring it forward and drop it. Get that center line, come back and kick. That center line right there, as loose as that is going to begin to help me guide. I like the collar, like the movable wings coming up. And yeah, I do too. I think it's kind of cool. So there's my drive line. Let's kind of get a little active with this thing. Let's kind of just break that in and begin to just put that thinness to it. Put that thinness to it. Let's put that disc back there just to kind of spot things in. That drops. That drops. Drive line. A little bit of the brow. Let's set up the triangle here. Let's draw through that. Notice I'm using the anatomy here. And let's drop this thing. Those lines are going to help me really set this thing up. It'd just be interesting in terms of how we put this together. So let's kind of come back in through here. Let's get that dihedral glove in here. Notice I'm just really blocking it in as I go here. There's the upper wing. Let's trace that over. There's its position on the far side of the vehicle itself. So there's my upper, up, and upper. Now let's go back to the lower here. Let's kind of beef this thing up a little bit. Get a little more character to it. Structure. Really playing this beauty up. Let's break this, keep it asymmetrical. And neat. Let's bring this back. Let's get that hood to work. Now let's get the cockpit in place. Notice I'm using the surfaces just to kind of generate the shapes. I'm just getting different forms to work with this here. Starting to put them together. See what's coming together here, gang? So far, so good. Pardon the silence, gang. I'm just concentrating here. There's a start. What do you think, gang? Yeah. Let's see. I mean, of course, yeah, this is yeah. Just it's really interesting how again another variation of the theme. Pardon me, a shepherd stick here. What do you think, gang? Come together all right? And there you go. There's a little study there. What do you think, guys? How are we going to have an armorless laser in the rear? Yeah. Let's see. It looks like a million sharp edges. Cut myself. They're very sharp. Would look epic. Entering atmosphere. Let's see how we got there. Dan, this keeps. Well, there it is, guys. A little thumbnail sketch here, and what we want to do with this beauty here. Just kind of put a little bit of reference to it here. I'm going to put a stick to it here. It still needs a name as well. Yeah, it does. Needs a name. Anybody need help here? It'd be great. Well, this is another little study. A little 3/4 front in this guy. What it's going to do here. Let's see, let's put a little bit of gesture together with this guy here. Let's see, what do we got here? A little bit of a gesture front end. What do you think, guys? Call it Sting. Oh, there you go. Got to run, Doc. See you later, everyone. Hey, thanks very much, Chip, for joining forces here for a little bit. Good to have you on board. Thank you so much. And right there. There's a pretty good interesting stance right there. What do you think, guys? How do you think? What do you think? The view is looking good, isn't it? I think that's the right view. I think no question there, Shadow. Looking good as far as the view goes. Just gonna wrap this thing up. Put a little bit of ground line on this guy. Little sense of scale. And the elevation study. There you are, guys. What do you think? Aha. What do you think, guys? I'm going to wrap it up with that beauty. There she is there, and just kind of give this a little bit of a background here. A little sense of scale. And there you go, guys. There we are. Let's wrap it up with that. How's that? Almost looks like a scorpion tail, too. Yeah, it does. It's kind of interesting how that. Let me put a little bit more magic in this thing here. There we go. That's it. So there's the genealogy for today, guys. Just putting together some pretty interesting little concept sketches here for what this guy's going to look like, hopefully. A little bit of character to it. The rear view and the front view, just dropping that thing right down, giving it a real solid stance. I hope this has been helpful to you, and I really appreciate those of you who tuned in today to follow some of the history of this thing. And again, let me just wrap it up by stating this. We're looking forward to going back in again live on Friday night with the Spacebar program with the Shadow Man, and start putting a little more program together here and get some interesting things put together. This has been a lot of fun here today. Really looks cool. Thanks, Captain Nemo. Again, your input was vital in this whole process last Friday night. So thank you again for tuning in. I hope your family is well, and I hope you're doing well. And again, if we can think of any neat names to work with on this thing, please let us know. So looking for a name, and named again a QuadraWing today for the very simple reason we want an upper and lower tier, one fixed, one adjustable. And again, so much fun today, folks. Thank you so much, those who are still with us. Doug, if you're still with us, thanks for taking the time to join us. We give a little bit of human scale to this guy, and a couple of sketches. We've gone through a whole anthology of development sketches here, so we'll keep it moving here. Tomorrow's stream will be a little bit different. I might take a bit of a break and regroup on some of the things we're dealing with here. But again, I thank you so much for joining forces today. It's always been a real treat to be a part of the process with you all. If you know anybody who's interested in learning how to draw and so forth, please, or some concept work, please send it to my website at Jim@DrContrast. Pardon me, that's my email address. Please drop me a note at my email address, Jim@DrContrast.com. More than happy to take any information of the things you want me to work on or go through or look like to work with you on. Be happy to do so to help. Secondly, please feel free to look at my website with a series of 9 lesson drawing plans on it. That's at drcontrast.com. Hope you'll find some interesting things there. And above all else, please pass along the word to some of your friends that are interested in maybe drawing, again, at my website. It's really been a real godsend in terms of helping young people put together some sketch ideas and rendering processing. So it does 9 lessons. It's pretty complete unto itself, very simple. It's very inexpensive. Take a look at the website and let me know what you think. And last but not least, as I sign off today, thanks for the time that you spent with me. Always appreciate it. And never forget to remember to dare to be great, because you are. All the very best, gang. Thank you and take care. See you tomorrow at 2:30. Thank you. Bye-bye.